I tell you, it is so much fun to walk into a bar or a restaurant and order something you made.
That's amazing, yeah.
I never tire of that experience.
Welcome to TapThatAZ, the show where you get to meet the awesome people behind the best craft beverages across the state of Arizona. I'm your host, Eric Walters. In this episode, I sit down with Steve and Paul from Hamilton Distillers out of Tucson. These guys make a mesquite smoked whiskey called Whiskey Del Bach that's just amazing. You guys got to try this stuff out. It was actually just named one of the top 10 whiskeys in America by Esquire magazine. Grab a drink and let's tap into Hamilton Distillers. Steven, thanks for joining me, man.
Nice to be here. Nice to meet you.
This is pretty awesome. My mom always said, watch out for people with two first names, but you seem like a good guy.
Well, that's been an affliction my whole life. I never take it personally when someone calls me Paul.
Okay.
So don't worry about that.
Do you think that maybe sometimes they think you're Steve and Paul, and they're like, well, what's your last name?
No, usually it's they confuse they want to call me Paul.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's fine. It's just a fact of life for me.
Okay, gotcha. Well, I'll call you Steven. So this whole thing kind of started with mesquite has been a central piece to this whole thing, right?
It has.
And where did that start?
Well, actually, my wife and I had a custom furniture company for 30 years that specialized in mesquite wood.
Oh, nice.
And we did pieces that were, fine furniture. Really, we had a national reputation. It was called Arroyo Design.
Okay.
And we approached it really carefully because mesquite had a bad reputation in terms of furniture wood. It's full of cracks and knots and wormholes.
Okay.
You can't buy it dry like you can walnut or cherry or something. And so, anyway, we built this company over the span of 30 years, and it was a really fun project, and we did great stuff and met a lot of great people. I would always take my mesquite scraps home to barbecue with.
Okay.
And I would always tell my wife, those are our profits going up in smoke.
Literally.
And and we're Scotch drinkers, and one night we're barbecuing and drinking Scotch, and she goes, why couldn't you dry malt over mesquite instead of peat like they do in Scotland?
Yeah.
And so that's how this whole project started. I was riveted by the idea. I thought it was like just a great idea. I've always called my wife Idea Woman because she is always coming out with things like this. And so I couldn't get it out of my head, ordered a little 5-gallon still from Portugal, started messing around with it, did that for a couple of years, started tasting really good. And then in 2011, I kind of graduated to a 40-gallon still. Okay. Ordered that from Portugal as well. And at that point, so I was still running Arroyo Design, and and I had to set that still up in our shop somewhere. So we partitioned off a little space in our wood shop. We would always give tours of our wood shop because we were so we were doing things that other people weren't doing in terms of mortise and tenon joinery and a bunch of other things like that had kind of fallen by the wayside in the furniture industry. So we loved giving tours, and I knew people were going to see this still, even if we partitioned it off, because anyway.
And you had to put it there because of the amount of room that it took up?
Yeah, the little 5-gallon still was driving my wife crazy at home.
Okay, and that's the little one, and we're in the distillery now, and that's the little one up on the top
shelf?
That's
it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Pretty small.
It is pretty small.
But I would leave it out, and it drove her crazy. She's a very design and oriented and stuff, so. But anyway, my daughter said, you know what, Dad, we got to get legal on this 40-gallon still because people are going to be seeing it. So that's how. So then she and I, my daughter's name's Amanda. Amanda and I, applied for the federal permits, state, local, and federal permits, and went through all that. We incorporated, and then took on an investor who was a old customer from the furniture business, who I'd been tasting on the product from the little still, and he kept telling me, if you ever get serious, let me know.
Because you had it down. Like you had a good...
We were getting there, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it was like compared to what we're doing now, it wasn't very good, but it was good enough to where it was showing some promise.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
So that's basically the story of how we got started. So then in 2014 we became I got investment to do this big 500-gallon system,
Okay.
and we became operational on this big system with a malt house in 2014.
Okay.
And I should say that so we malt our own barley.
What does that mean exactly? So what it is, because I like drinking whiskey, but how it's made, I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. So we're using the Scottish model of whiskey making.
Okay.
So we're making an American single malt whiskey,
Yeah.
which is what a Scotch is typically. There's some blended Scotches, but single malts are kind of what's driving the market. They've been driving the market for a good 10 to 15 years. A single malt whiskey is made from 100% barley malt
Okay.
and distilled in a single distillery.
Okay.
As opposed to a blended Scotch, for example, say take a Dewar's, they are buying from different distilleries who they've bought from for many decades, and they know the products really well. And then they take those whiskeys from all those different distilleries and blend them into what goes into the bottle.
Okay.
And so that is not inferior by any means, but that's what a blended Scotch is.
Gotcha.
And so a single malt whiskey, so a single malt Scotch, for example, is what most people are used to thinking about, is all made in a single distillery from 100% barley malt mash bill or recipe.
Okay.
That's the basic definition of a single malt. And so there are a few distilleries. Actually, there are, at last count, like 42 distilleries in the States that are making American single malt whiskey.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
And single malts have, from what my experience, single malts are like blends like Johnny Walker, Dewar's, things like that.
Exactly, yeah.
They're more, I guess, easier to drink, but they don't have the character. Like that's what
That's maybe true, but there's some, pretty heavily peated blended whiskeys that are, not for kind of people that are new to single malts. They can be a little bit unapproachable because of the amount of peat.
Right. Like a Lafrogue or
that's a single malt, but so Johnny Walker Black, for example, is very heavily peated.
Okay.
So whiskey is made from grain, and in order to make alcohol, you need sugar.
Okay.
And what you do is you feed sugar to yeast, and the yeast consumes the sugar and makes alcohol and CO2.
Okay.
That's how alcohol is made. So whiskey's made from grain. Grain doesn't have any fermentable sugar. It just has starch. And by the way, beer is the same way. Beer is all made from grain.
Okay.
So this cool thing happens when you germinate a grain, and any grain will do this, but barley is the most efficient grain to do this with. So I'll just talk about barley specifically, but when you germinate barley, it creates an enzyme that turns starch to sugar.
Interesting.
During germination. And it does that so that when the seed, when the barley or any grain grows into a plant, it'll actually have that sugar to consume when it's growing into the plant.
Gotcha.
So we malt our own barley.
Okay.
During germination, when it has created the enzyme, that is the definition of malt. So as soon as it's got the enzyme, it's called malt.
Okay.
So we're one of only 7 distilleries in the country that we know of that malt our own barley.
Okay.
It's
nice.
really rare.
Yeah.
And actually, in Scotland anymore, there are only 7 distilleries that malt their own barley.
Really?
Yeah. So
Wow.
I didn't know this going in, but we're in this pretty small, club of distilleries that malt, really worldwide. I'm sure there are some in kind of India, maybe New Zealand. There's some other places that are making good whiskey that may malt their own barley. But as far as we know, there's only 14, and I'm sure there's some others. But anyway, it's a small club.
Yeah.
And we actually had to start malting our own barley because of this idea to dry the malt over mesquite.
Gotcha, which is kind of the cornerstone of
the whole project.
Yeah.
And I was floor malting early on the little 40-gallon still, little 70-pound batches. Floor malting is what they traditionally do in Scotland.
Okay.
They steep the grain and let it soak up a bunch of water, and then they spread it on the floor. Grain bed is about 8 inches deep or so. Takes up a lot of floor space.
Okay.
They turn it by hand typically. So when we graduated to this 500-gallon system and wanted to put in this malt house, I wanted to save floor space.
Okay.
And I also wanted to have more control over the process in terms of temperatures and airflows and humidity levels and things like that.
Yeah.
So we designed this tank-based system that is really unique. There's nothing like it in the country that we know of. And so the grain bed is 36 inches deep, so 3 feet deep grain bed. So we're saving a bunch of floor space.
Okay.
It's a 10-foot diameter tank. So basically we do this, we do what we were doing when we floor malted, but in a tank.
Yeah.
So we steep it first, transfer that, very water-soaked grain over to the germination tank. We're doing 5,000-pound batches. We let it germinate for a couple of days. After the first day in the tank, we're pulling out individual, a little handful of kernels, and we are opening them up and looking for a little shoot that grows up the inside of the kernel called an acrospire.
Okay.
When that acrospire is about 80% the length of the seed itself, that's when it's got the enzyme. There's a couple of other little benchmarks we're looking for, but that's the main one. That's the signal that it's got the enzyme and is now officially malt.
Okay.
So that same germination tank now we will convert to a kilning tank. We actually call it our GK tank, germination/kilning tank.
Okay.
And then we've got to dry it. So in Scotland, their fuel was peat, or still is peat to some extent.
Okay.
They don't have many trees in Scotland, so they dig up these peat bogs,
Nice.
dry the peat, and burn that.
Okay.
And the smoke involved in burning dried peat is pretty pronounced.
Okay.
So that was and is still to some extent their fuel in Scotland. And my wife had this idea, knowing full well that what mesquite does to food when you cook over it.
Right.
That's why she had this idea to dry malt over mesquite.
Right. Okay.
And so at this point, we're going to dry the malt. We're going to build a fire for our mesquite smoked whiskeys, because we've got one that's not mesquite smoked.
That's
but
the
for
classic here.
Yep.
Okay.
We'll build a fire in the burner box outside with mesquite. It's typically our native mesquite here is Prosopis velutina, which is called velvet mesquite, and we'll pump that heat and smoke excuse me, up through the grain bed in the tank and dry the malt.
Okay.
Like that. So for our unsmoked classic whiskey, we will just use basically a natural gas-fired heat and pump that through with no smoke to dry the malt.
So it's just a heat rather than a smoke dried.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then when we got the malt dry, we'll transfer that 5,000-pound batch into one of two grain silos here inside the distillery. One is for smoked, one is for unsmoked. And then we're ready to basically make we start by making a rudimentary beer,
Okay.
just like a brewer does.
Yeah.
But we don't go on and do all the really fantastic things that brewers do to make the delicious, range of beers.
Okay.
We're just interested in a basic rudimentary beer that then we're going to distill the alcohol out of.
Okay. Gotcha. And then it turns into this beautiful stuff that we have right in front of us.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So I always like to start people out with our unsmoked classic because many people aren't used to smoke.
Okay.
And so the classic, again, we're using a Scottish model of whiskey making. So the classic is made with malt that's not smoked.
Okay.
It's modeled after a Speyside Scotch. In the Speyside region of Scotland, they don't use a lot of peat.
Okay.
And so you're welcome to go ahead and
Don't mind if
take
I
a
do.
little sip of that. And I always recommend that people kind of, nose it first, and like you're doing right now, just run it across your nose. With wine, you're going to want to, most people like stick their nose into the glass.
Right.
But the higher alcohol of whiskey, doesn't want you to, it's better not to stick your nose in there.
Okay. I do. That's one of my favorite things about whiskey. My father-in-law's he introduced me to whiskey.
Oh, okay.
Because I grew up in Ohio, and whiskey to us was Jack Daniels. That was it.
Uh-huh.
We thought that was the only one. So he was a big fan of single malt. So first time I actually tried a single malt Scotch, like I took a drink, I was like, ugh.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just did it like a shot because I couldn't handle it. But now I've developed my palate, and I'll sit there for 2 minutes just getting the smell in.
Yeah. And then on your first sip, what I like to tell people, and you probably know this already, but is just to let it kind of a little bit touch your tongue and let it spread across your tongue before you take an actual sip. Mm-hmm. I mean, just a little bit, and that kind of sets the tone.
Yeah. If you guys could taste this like through audio, this is delicious. I've had the smoke. That's the only thing I've had, and that's what I like. Like you just said, let it go across your tongue. It coats your mouth, and I like whiskeys that do that. Mm-hmm. And your smoked one, the mesquite smoked one, really has that kick to it, and this one does too. This is great.
So the classic for 2 years in a row has won silver at the Great I'm sorry. I'm going to start over on that. So our Whiskey Del Bach Classic, unsmoked, has for 2 years in a row won silver medals at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition.
Wow.
This year, the cask strength version of the classic won a double gold.
Well, I did see that.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does double gold mean?
Well,
it sounds good.
Yeah, it's
really
great.
Good.
It means different things in different competitions, but in the San Francisco World Spirits Competition, it means that on the judging panel that was considering the classic, and again, this was our cask strength version, every judge voted it gold.
Okay.
So on a panel, typically you may have, if you're going to win a gold, maybe you'll have 3 or 4, depending on the scores that they give it, 3 or 4 judges out of 5 will deem it gold worthy. Okay.
Okay.
But in the case for a double gold, every single judge deems it gold worthy.
Wow.
So that's the definition in this competition.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's impressive.
Yeah,
that's a
we're
unanimous
thrilled.
decision.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And actually, that competition is the biggest one in the country.
Oh, really? I've heard of it before. Like
Yeah.
I've heard of it. Like, and when I saw it, I think you guys had it on Instagram, and that's okay too. That's okay. In the background will drown out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So on Instagram, I saw the double gold, and I'm like, and I've seen things from the San Francisco that competition, and I didn't exactly know what double gold meant, but I knew that there's probably nothing better than double gold.
Yeah, there is nothing better than double gold. Yeah.
Yes. So okay, so we got the classic. We taste the classic.
So if you want to move to the Dorado,
Okay.
this is the brainchild of the whole project here. This is, came from my wife's idea to dry malt over mesquite. And this actually comes out of the barrel a little smokier than what you're going to taste in the glass. And
Okay.
I didn't want to overwhelm people with smoke. And so we actually back it off with a little bit of classic. When we're going to go to bottle,
Okay.
we blend in a little bit of classic to just kind of moderate the smoke a little bit.
Okay. And it does smell like barbecue, like not just like the smoke, like it smells like a brisket almost.
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
not a bad thing at all. Man, and you when you taste it still, do you just like, wow?
I'm always impressed, and it's such a thrill.
Yeah.
So actually, the Dorado at last year's San Francisco World Spirits Competition won a double gold.
Really?
Yeah.
Man.
So 2 years in a row, double golds.
Yeah.
In two different products, but.
And you've been doing this since when? 2007?
Early 2007, and I only really got serious about it in 2011.
You went from the 5-gallon to 500-gallon in a matter of
We
6
went
years?
to the 5-gallon, from the 5-gallon to the 40-gallon.
To the 40. Okay.
And worked on the 40-gallon for a couple years, and I actually had an investor on that phase.
Oh, gotcha.
And
yeah.
so that, when someone gives you money to do something, then you got to take it real seriously, because they're taking you real seriously.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Things just got real.
Yeah. And so did that for a couple years. Really took product to the local marketplace maybe in late 2012 because it had to sit in barrels. Then in 2014 we graduated from the 40-gallon still to the 500-gallon system with the big malt house.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for doing that, because now I can get it wherever yeah.
Yeah. I tell you, it is so much fun to walk into a bar or a restaurant and order something you made.
That's amazing. Yeah.
I never tire of that experience.
Yeah.
So
do you ever get anybody that does so you sit down, you order that, and somebody just randomly beside says, "Oh man, that's really good."
We get that all the time.
That is awesome.
Yeah. And then and then if someone finds out we're, connected to the whiskey, we are always regaled with their accounts of the first time they ever tasted it, or the camping trip they took it on with their uncle, or
Yeah.
it's really fun.
Well, like we were talking before when I first got here, is like with this podcast, like the whiskey is almost like secondary. With that, it's you. I mean, obviously you make great whiskey, but it's those stories and the things that people have behind it that really hold that value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many stories that are so much fun.
Yeah. So, whiskey, Del Bach. What is? So you got Hamilton is the distillery.
Hamilton is the distillery.
Okay.
And Hamilton is my mom's maiden name.
Okay.
And actually, Amanda suggested the name because the furniture company, Arroyo Design, had been named after my wife's family.
Okay.
Her maiden name is Arroyo.
All right.
And then, so when it came time to name this distillery, my daughter Amanda who was always very close to my mom before she passed away. My Amanda goes, "We got to do something for Nana," and so that's why it became Hamilton Distillers. So
Okay.
That's my mom's maiden name. It's my middle name, and then actually it occurred to me later that grandfather, my granddad, drank Scotch.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it's a great little kind of continuum,
Yeah. That's awesome, because I was wondering that because your last name is Paul, but I'm like, it's Hamilton. Now it makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, what about Del Bach? What is Del Bach?
So Del Bach we actually took that from our mission that was established here in Tucson in the late 1600s.
Okay.
Jesuit missionaries founded this mission that and founded it in a place where there was surface water along the Santa Cruz River. Because as any Arizonans know who are listening to this, our what we call rivers here would shock people from
Right.
anywhere else because they're dry.
Yeah.
But occasionally there is in our normally dry riverbeds there's surface water that comes to the surface, and in the native Tohono O'odham language, that is called a Bach, B-A-C.
Okay.
And so Father Kino named the mission San Javier del Bac, which means San Xavier of the Spanish del, and then Bac means place where the river reappears in the sand, and so del Bac is of the place where the river reappears in the sand. So, and this actually was also my wife's idea.
Yeah,
and we went through many
she does
iterations.
Have some great ideas. Yes.
Yeah, we went through many iterations of the label, and that was a long and sometimes contentious process with like basically 5 designers involved. My
so
wife.
These are all the. So I'm looking in the room here, and there's a bunch of different labels. Those are kind of different ones you guys went through before you chose the one you have.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you're only seeing the front poster of those, and so there's 2 or 3 more, behind that. So it was a long, really fun process, but contentious at times because all of us were very strong, strongly opinionated.
Right.
I had a pet version that got thrown by the wayside, so anyway, but what we came up with was great. But the Whiskey del Bac, I later realized. So I've always loved living in a border region.
Okay.
Because it makes you look at the world in different ways, and the mix of cultures is just so much fun.
Yeah.
It just enriches your life, really. So it turns out, didn't plan on this, but Whiskey del Bac is trilingual. So whiskey.
Really? Yeah.
English, Del, Spanish, and Bach, Tohono O'odham. So that's kind of fun.
And that wasn't intentional?
It was not intentional.
No, nice.
We were just basically looking. So the concept was a regional project. I'm sorry. The concept was a regional product because of the mesquite component.
Which is native to the Southwest, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And so we were just looking to express where we were from in the name and the brand. And so Whiskey del Bac was just like perfect.
Yeah, it is. I like the name. I love the label you guys went with. I'm going to put some pictures up on the website too of the other versions if you're okay with that too.
Totally.
Yeah, because I can see them from here and they look pretty awesome. And you guys, you have a few episodes ago I did an interview with Ben from Crooked Tooth, the brewery down here in Tucson, and he had some of his beers aging in your barrels, and he said, "Oh, you gotta get them on the show." And I have one of my buddies is a big fan of your whiskey, so there's a lot of support out there and a lot of of thumbs up saying, "Hey, these guys are legit."
Cool.
Yeah. So with the beer thing, so that's pretty cool too because there's a local aspect to this as well, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's that like?
Well, first of all, thank you, Ben, if you're listening. But yeah, a bunch of breweries have been taking our used barrels and aging different beers in them, which has been really fun.
Yeah.
About a year ago, we at a little pub here called Tap and Bottle, they did a tap takeover with so the evening was all consisted of offerings of beers from various breweries in town that had used our barrels.
Wow.
So you could do flights of different brews that had been aged in our barrels, which was really fun.
That's really cool. Yeah. That's
yeah.
rare. You don't see that. It's always like, hey, tap takeover of Barrio or Borderlands.
Yeah.
Not like a whiskey aged. That's pretty cool.
It was really fun.
Yeah.
It's been so the sense of community that we've experienced in doing this project is really heartwarming. There's so much going on in Tucson as far as creativity and in food and beer and all kinds of drink, and farmers are doing great things, growing like indigenous crops. So the sense of community, like people want to share what they're doing, and they want to try to connect with what other people are doing.
Yeah.
And here's a great example. We give our spent grain to E&R Pork,
Okay.
Rod Miller. He picks up our spent grain, feeds it to his hogs. They love it. Last spring, Rod gave each of our employees a half a hog.
Half a hog?
Yeah.
Wow, that's
And
awesome.
so
Are
he
you
was just
hiring?
so, I know, really, right? So he's just so appreciative of that. And because we just give it to him. We're happy to see it gone.
Yeah,
You know?
that's what I've heard. It's kind of a pain to get rid of it. So if
It
someone's
is.
willing to come get it.
Oh, yeah. So he gave us each a cut sheet, like for how to have it butchered. We had to pay for the butchering,
Okay.
which was like minimal.
Yeah, totally worth it.
And yeah, so that was really cool. And so there's so many connections that people are making with each other. Barrio bread used some of our spent grain to bake into some bread a while ago. I mean, restaurants are using locally grown, corn and beans and all kinds of things. So there's so much happening in Tucson. I don't know if you've heard of the UNESCO designation that we received
No,
a year
what's
ago. So UNESCO has this program called Creative Cities.
Okay.
We received the City of Gastronomy designation from UNESCO for that very thing, the creativity that is occurring here using indigenous, native, and wild desert plants. And that's just part of it, actually. I mean, the 4,000-year, continuous 4,000-year history of agriculture in this area played a huge role. And the fact that it's been continuous and that we are relating, like all these chefs and, farmers are keeping that going,
Yeah.
was a huge factor in that designation. So there's only I think 5 cities in the world that has received the
Really?
UNESCO City of Gastronomy designation.
Yeah.
Parma, Italy is one. Ensenada, Mexico is one.
Okay.
And you'd think well, why isn't New York or all these bigger, San Francisco?
Yeah.
It's because of this kind of continuous consciousness of what we're doing here, like regional agriculture, and how to use what we have here.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've actually had through the distillery we've had and visit Tucson, our local visitors bureau.
Okay. Yeah.
Has been instrumental in this, but through the distillery here, we have entertained in the last kind of 10 months no fewer than, and I'm not exaggerating, 50 travel writers, like food and beverage writers and travel writers,
Yeah.
who have come to Tucson because of this designation.
Wow.
Yeah, and we've
Nice.
had tons of articles. No article yet on the distillery by itself,
Okay.
but probably 20 to 25 articles on Tucson that we were mentioned in. So that's
Gotcha.
been really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I think I'm the first podcast, right?
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Even if I'm not, just say I am. Yeah.
No, I don't think we've done a podcast that addressed this. So
I think it's so the community, it's because I do a lot of brewery interviews, and just the community everybody is so involved, and everybody's about everybody else too. It's not cutthroat of don't go there, those guys are jerks kind of. It's hey, let's collaborate on brews, let's age our beer in your whiskey barrels. I like that.
yeah, it is. Tucson is a real community-oriented place. There's not competition so much as there is cooperation.
Right. Camaraderie, maybe a little bit to push each other.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a sense of who's doing what and
Right.
things like that, and it makes you work a little harder.
Yeah.
But really, the cooperation component is so thrilling.
Yeah.
It's a really fun time in Tucson right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, so you guys are available. So where can you? I just heard you just expanded to Maryland and Washington D.C. Is that right? Where all can you find that?
Both of those, we're in California for almost a year now.
Okay.
We are just had product arrive at our distributor, our new distributor in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut.
Okay.
So we're going to be rolling out there shortly. We are also in Missouri. We're also in Georgia, about to be in Georgia. We just are completing compliance for the state.
Okay.
Also Texas, we're in the same kind of stage.
Yeah.
We've been picked up by distributors in both of those states, and we're completing compliance. So we'll have product there, I would say, in 2 months.
Okay.
So yeah, we're getting out there.
And so where do you see it? Like where do you want to be across the board?
We're going to focus on some kind of key markets.
Okay.
We are a small staff. We need to be in the marketplace with our staff to just kind of work with the distributor to educate them, to do what they call work withs, like ride-alongs. And so we're going to try to focus on, maybe 10 or 12 key markets.
Okay.
And so if we're in Georgia, that's going to mean really just Atlanta, and we'll focus on that.
I see what you mean, yeah.
And so that's our game plan.
Okay.
Yeah. So later, who knows? But we want to do a good job at the markets we're in first, and then take it from there.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, I think it goes with the way that you make the whiskey. It's about the quality. Like quality is like paramount for you.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
That's good. So
yeah.
Keep that up.
The quality of the whiskey. So our approach to making whiskey kind of grew out of our approach to making the furniture.
Okay.
I started Arroyo Design in 1986. First of all, there wasn't a lot of custom furniture makers, and there still aren't. It's a hard business.
Okay.
But things like mortise and tenon joinery had gone by the wayside. Mm-hmm. Book matching tabletops or panels had gone by the wayside. People were using dowel construction, which is not horrible, but it's not as good as mortise and tenon.
Okay.
So I wanted to revive a lot of these old joinery techniques and other approaches to making furniture and really make things to last for generations that were also beautiful.
Okay.
And by the way, mesquite is visually spectacular. Mm-hmm. And when I was doing woodworking early on, I was very aware that all of the kind of beautiful woods were coming from the rainforest.
Okay.
So there's spectacular woods coming from Brazil, for example. But that's not very good for the rainforest. Mm-hmm. And I realized that there was this just visually just stunning wood growing all around us here.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to employ that, and so I had to put in a kiln because you can't find mesquite dry. And anyway, a lot of ways we're really trying to make a great product, and we gained a really great national reputation for doing that over the span of 30 years when we were running that business.
Because of the quality you guys put. Like
exactly.
That focus on the quality.
Yeah. We actually guaranteed our product ongoing because mesquite didn't have a good reputation.
Okay.
It was full of cracks and knots and wormholes. You couldn't get it dry. You had to dry it yourself. But I knew that we could make it so, if we dried it and used all those good joinery techniques and things, that it could last forever. But people would always be suspicious of the cracks, which we filled with epoxy and things like that. But they would say, well, it cracked once. Will it crack again? And I would say, no, but if it ever does, we'll take care of it.
Yeah.
I have a couple of business school friends that thought I was crazy for doing that.
Okay.
But I was confident in what we were doing. Anyway, long story short, when it came to making the whiskey, we wanted to use the same approach. And so we take a lot of care in making the whiskey, just like we did with the furniture.
Yeah. That's good. And it shows. Like I said, I've had the mesquite smoke before, and then the classic today. So, and I think when we're done here, you're going to let me try the clear and the... You
want to do that now?
Yeah, might as well. That way people can listen to me drinking it.
So I always pour this one last. I pre-pour the other two.
Okay.
But the clear is very smoky. and it kind of can take over the table if I pour it with
Really?
the others. Yeah.
I didn't expect that from a clear.
Yeah, and you can already smell it, right? Even
wow.
from a distance.
Yeah. It almost smells like an imperial stout beer in a way.
Yeah, haven't heard that one before, but
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so this is what goes into the barrel to make the Dorado. So this is going to be a little smokier than the Dorado.
Wow, that has a really unique taste.
It does, right?
Good though, like
It's
really good.
So there's a bunch of, beneath the smoke, and the kind of, there's a sweetness and kind of floral notes, if you're getting those. I mean, sometimes people get that.
Yeah, actually both. Yeah, my palate is adjusting.
And so, yeah, this has been this is something we did not originally plan on bottling, but early on we just recognized that it was tasting so good coming out of the still that we decided to bottle it. And it's primarily used in cocktails.
Okay.
As a smoky base for mixing cocktails. It's been super popular with bartenders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just straight up, it's really good. It's unique. I'm not saying I'm a whiskey expert by any means, but I like trying new things, and I've tried quite a few. I've never had anything that tastes like this.
Right?
Very unique.
Yeah. And we will get, like, when we do tours and tastings here at the distillery, we'll get like 1 or 2 people out of 10, let's say, that actually prefer this over the 2 aged products.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which always surprises me, but it is definitely that kind of statistic holds. It's, it happens all the time. 1 to 2 people.
In the description here, it says vegetal notes.
Mm-hmm.
I can totally see that. Like the finish is like it has that taste to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's complex.
Yeah.
Different. Each part of it is a little bit different than the last. So, well, hey, thanks for letting me taste all this, Stephen. This has been great. Hamilton Distillery. What's the website?
HamiltonDistillers.com.
Okay.
So distillers plural.
Distillers plural. Okay.
.com, yeah.
Gotcha. And then you can go there and you can find all the places you can get it, right?
Yep. We have a page on our website called Find.
Okay.
And we're in Arizona. We're available. In hundreds of places.
That list is huge. Yeah, because I was gonna buy some. So when we were communicating, and you were like, yeah, let's do this. Let's do the show. I'm like, well, I got to try it. So I'm like, I'll go on their website to see where I can find it. And I'm like, okay, I don't think I'm gonna have a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
No, we're all over the place in Arizona, and that's what we're kind of shooting for in the markets that we're going to focus on in California and other states. Yeah. So.
Awesome. Well, you guys go to the website, see where you can find it. If you're in Arizona, just go to a bar. You'll probably find it there. But Stephen, thanks, man. I really appreciate this.
Eric, this was fun. Appreciate you coming.
For sure. Hey guys, thanks for listening to another episode. Hope you enjoyed the show. Stephen Paul, such an amazing dude, just a great guy, making some awesome whiskey down there in Tucson. You guys got to try this out. If you like smoky whiskey, this stuff is phenomenal. Go to the liquor store, go to a restaurant, see if they have this Whiskey Del Bach. Try it out. Hope you enjoy it. In the meantime, do me a big favor. I'm trying to spread the word on this show, trying to get it out to as many people as I can, and I need your help. So I want to show the passion and the creativity and the great things that the Arizona craft beverage community is doing. So I want to get this out to as many people as we can, and I need your help. So rating and reviews on iTunes helps. Spread the word, get me high up in the rankings there. Also tell a friend, tell somebody you think might like it. Hey, dude, check out this podcast. If you like craft beverages in Arizona, local Arizona stuff, check it out. I truly appreciate it. In the next episode, I traveled to Goodyear to talk to the people who opened up the very first brewery in Goodyear. So you don't want to miss this one. In the meantime, always remember, stay awesome.